Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back once again to Today in African History with Baba Shaka. I'm Baba Shaka, and today is May 27, 2021, and it's the anniversary of the beginning of the Poor People's Campaign under the leadership of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the SCLC. Martin Luther King announced the Poor People's Campaign at a staff retreat for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or SCLC, in November of 1967. Seeking a quote-unquote middle ground between riots on the one hand and timid supplications for justice on the other, Dr. King planned for an initial group of 2,000 poor people to descend on Washington, D.C., southern states, and northern cities to meet with government officials to demand jobs, unemployment insurance, a fair minimum wage, and education for poor adults and children designed to improve their self-image and self-esteem. Suggested to Dr. King by Marion Wright Edelman, director of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or NAACP, Legal Defense Fund and Educational Fund in Jackson, Mississippi, the Poor People's Campaign was seen by the good doctor as the next chapter in the struggle for genuine equality. Desegregation and the right to vote were essential, but Dr. King believed that Africans in America and other minorities would never enter full citizenship until they had economic security. Through nonviolent direct action, Dr. King and SCLC hoped to focus the nation's attention on economic inequality and poverty. This is a highly significant event, Dr. King told delegates at the early planning meeting, describing the campaign as, quote, the beginning of a new cooperation, understanding, and determination by poor people of all colors and backgrounds to assert and win their right to a decent life and respect for their culture and dignity, unquote. Many leaders of the American Indian, Puerto Rican, Mexican American, and poor white communities pledged themselves to the Poor People's Campaign. But some in the SCLC thought Dr. King's campaign too ambitious and the demands less than clear. Now, although Dr. King praised the simplicity of the campaign's goals, saying, quote, it's as pure as a man needed an income to support his family, unquote, he knew that the campaign was inherently different from others SCLC had attempted. We have an ultimate goal of freedom, independence, self-determination, whatever you want to call it. But we aren't going to get it all right now, and we aren't going to get it all next year, he commented at a staff meeting on the 17th of January in 1968. Quote, let's find something that is so possible, so achievable, so pure, so simple that even the backlash can't do much to deny it, and yet something so non-token and so basic to life that even the black nationalists can't disagree with it that much, unquote, right? Now, after Dr. King's assassination in April of 1968, SCLC decided to go on with the campaign under the leadership of Ralph Abernathy, SCLC's new president. So on Mother's Day, the 12th of May, 1968, thousands of women led by Coretta Scott King formed the first wave of demonstrators. The following day, Resurrection City, a temporary settlement of tents and shacks, was built right on the mall in Washington, D.C. Braving rain, mud, and summer heat, protesters stayed for over a month. Demonstrators made daily pilgrimage to various federal agencies to protest and demand economic justice. And midway through this campaign, Robert Kennedy, whose wife had attended the Mother's Day opening of Resurrection City, was unfortunately assassinated. But out of respect for the campaign, his funeral procession passed through Resurrection City. But the Department of the Interior forced Resurrection City to close on the 24th of June, 1968, after the permit to use the park had expired. Now, although the campaign succeeded in small ways, such as qualifying 200 counties for free surplus food distribution and securing promises from several federal agencies to hire poor people to help run programs for the poor, Dr. Abernathy felt that these concessions were insufficient. And indeed they were. Now, more than 50 years later, the poor, in most respects, are worse off than they were when Dr. King was murdered. In the intervening years, most politicians have ignored the poor, while others have actively worked against the interests of the poor. Now, I've already heard it said that you can always tell one's priorities by the way one spends money. Today, for every dollar that the U.S. government spends, 54 cents goes to the military. That leaves just 46 cents for everything else: education, health care, infrastructure, and taking care of the poor. And as we have seen over the past year or so during the pandemic, or some would say the plandemic, the size of the poor has increased, while at the same time the super rich have become even richer. But some in our communities are not taking this lying down. There have been a reviving, if you will, of the Poor People's Campaign under the leadership of one Reverend William Barber II and Reverend Liz Theo Harris. And according to Reverend Barber, quote, "If America does not address what's happening with visionary social and economic policy, the health and well-being of the nation is at stake. What we need is, is long-term economic policy that establishes justice, promotes the general welfare, rejects decades of austerity, and builds strong social programs that lift society from below," unquote. Unlike others who from time to time would offer criticisms without suggestions for our solutions, Reverend Barber and the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for more revival as the new movement is called, have proposed a list of 14 policy priorities reminiscent of the 10-point program offered by the Black Panther Party about 50 years ago. Their 14 policy priorities are as follows. Number 1, enact free and just COVID-19 relief. Number 2, guarantee quality health care for all, regardless of any pre-existing condition. 3, raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour immediately. 4, update the poverty measure. 5, guarantee quality housing for all. 6, enact a federal jobs program to build up investments, infrastructure, public institutions, climate resilience, energy efficiency, and socially beneficial industries, and jobs in poor and low-income communities. Number 7, protect and expand voting rights and civil rights. Number 8, guarantee safe, quality, equitable public education with supports for protection against resegregation. 9, comprehensive and just immigration reform. 10, ensure all the rights of indigenous people. 11, and this is serious, enact fair taxes. Number 12, use the powers of executive orders. 13, redirect the bloated Pentagon budget towards these priorities as matters of national security. And 14, work with the Poor People's Campaign to establish a permanent presidential council to advocate for this bold agenda. Right. Now, some of you out there may have from time to time entertained the notion that you were born too late to be part of the great civil and human rights movement. Well, I have good news for you. You have the opportunity to get involved with this new Poor People's Campaign and do some good. All you have to do is Google, how do I get involved with the Poor People's Campaign? That's what I did a couple of days ago. Just Google, how do I get involved with the Poor People's Campaign? And that will take you to a page that would explain everything that you need to know in order to lend your support, right? But before you do that, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button right down there, right there. Like and leave a comment down in the comment section below. But as I say every day, most importantly, please share, especially with the young amongst us. So, until tomorrow, inshallah, this is Baba Shaka with Today in African History. Masalam.